Welcome back, guys, to episode 30 of the JPS podcast. And today I'm very honored to have the very jacked, strong, and wonderful Leanna Carr. Who's flex, Leanna? There she is.
I gotta get a pump on.
You can't flex without a pump, right? And for those of you who may not be aware, Leanna is very heavily involved in the bodybuilding powerlifting community. She has a degree in sports psychology and is actively working to inspire and empower women as a coach at Iron Women, as well as working for a non-for-profit foundation, Smart Fit Girls. So she's doing a lot of really good things. And in today's episode, we're going to be discussing all things psychology, as they relate to female athletes, specifically in the context of, strength sports and physique. So, Leanna, to give the listeners some background about you, beyond what I've just told them, obviously, can you outline how you got into the lifting game, transitioned from cheerleader to party girl, I believe, and then into one of the US of A's leading figure athletes and powerlifters?
Oh man, all right. Well, first of all, I'm super excited to be on here. Thank you for having me. And yeah, we'll just get started. I guess I would say that I started lifting. So I got my first gym membership about 6 years ago, and this was an official gym membership. I was very active. I was an athlete and a competitive cheerleader for probably about 8, 9 years growing up. So I was always active in that regard. And then college came around, of course, and then you know how college is. Especially, I went to the University of Georgia, so we were known for being a party school, and gained a little bit of weight. Really, it wasn't until my junior year of undergrad where I just had gained some weight. I was feeling really just as you know, low confidence, low self-esteem. I just didn't really feel good about myself, and I missed being as active as I was whenever I was a cheerleader. So I got a gym membership. I set out to lose some weight as a New Year's resolution. And I'm definitely the type of person who, whenever I dedicate myself to a goal, I'm just like an all or nothing type of person. So I immersed myself in the gym. I loved lifting weights. I loved, obviously I started, going to the gym to lose weight and to look a certain way, but then I found that, going to the gym and performing and getting stronger and hitting PRs, that was something that just challenged me in a completely different way. That's kind of when I got into figure. I decided, all right, I lost some weight. I look good. I'm going to do a figure competition. I think like most people, that's kind of how
we
they
all start out.
tend to get into it. Exactly. They're like, you know what? I can do this. I can, drop an extra 20 pounds on top of what I've already lost and, step up on stage. And, obviously once I dieted down, I realized like, holy cow, I actually have no muscle. And then after that, it was, I think the very typical story of, you see yourself at your absolute best on stage. You see yourself at your leanest. I went from 165 pounds to about 120, and that was a huge difference. And then obviously I dealt with a lot of the psychological turmoil that athletes go through, physique athletes go through post-show. So that's kind of when I found powerlifting. And then I, was like, all right, instead of focusing on the way that I look or being a certain number on the scale, I'm going to start putting my efforts towards getting stronger in the gym and towards my performance. So I started powerlifting at the University of Georgia. And then, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
No, it's very cool. And I think, your journey is obviously unique in many regards, but very common, for physique athletes. They get into the bodybuilding or they get into the gym to try and, improve self-esteem, how they look, how they feel. They start making some gains, compete, and then realize that, holy crap, this dieting thing is a lot harder than I thought. And, I'm pretty messed up, always worrying about how I look. And they shift that focus to performance and powerlifting, and they get into powerlifting. So that's what we're going to talk about today. But to wind back the clock to bodybuilding, and obviously the consequences of natural bodybuilding, they're quite well known. And for women, obviously extended periods like at hypercaloric conditions, like getting really low body fat percentages can cause a lot of havoc for the reproductive system. Were there times in your bodybuilding career that you saw, a lot of these physical health issues come about? and how did they then affect your, mental state during those periods?
Okay, and this is a really good question, and I think it definitely affects people differently. But just to kind of talk a little bit about that, I think I actually did a research paper about 2 years ago. So this was after I'd already competed, and I had already dealt with the emotional and psychological turmoil that something that was coined as the epitome of health, right? So we see bodybuilding, we see competitors. We go to fitness expos and industries, and these women and men, they have six packs and they look great, and they're like, holy cow, like they must be really healthy. And then obviously after a while you get into the industry, and then you get to see like the back end of it, and you see that, okay, these people look healthy, but they are the furthest thing from that. There's a lot of psychopathology that is involved in physique sports, like eating disorders, body dysmorphia, low self-esteem. And that was kind of what I learned going to school for sports psychology in my master's program. I learned that about 75% of people, give or take, who are attracted to whether it be physique-related sports or weight class sports, have suffered at some point from some sort of low body image or eating, or not even eating disorder, but disordered eating background in the past. And a lot of people who are drawn to competing in physique sports, they are looking to fill some sort of void that eating or, their diseating or disordered eating habits weren't able to fulfill at one point. So that was like something that I did research on, and I was like, holy cow. So not only are the people who are drawn to physique sports already, not everybody, but a lot of us are prone to already have had some sort of low body image issues in the past. But when you obviously put something that is just so, like you said, demanding on the body, not only hormonally, but, being in a calorically restricted state for a very long time has a lot of impact on just your physical well-being and your psychological well-being. It's kind of a recipe for disaster, So that's kind of that's the part that I was interested in sports psychology literally because of these psychological aspects, that I suffered whenever I competed. And I see so many athletes who do a show, and they are, they're on this high, right? They chase, or they do a contest prep for 5-6 months, however long it is, sometimes longer. And they're motivated, and they're able to adhere to their diet and their training because they have this end goal. And then whenever that end goal is taken away from them, they not only have just like a very skewed way of thinking when it comes to food, like counting every macro to a T, which it's not bad. Obviously, it's something that we need to do in order to reach these very strict and specific goals. But at the same time, it is clinically categorized as disordered eating. So I think it's kind of knowing when to be able to flip the switch between a contest prep and regular life. And unfortunately, a lot of the habits that are learned in a contest prep, people don't know how to get out of that. So they go into an off season, and they have no idea how to eat normally. They've been so food focused for so long. They like go to sleep at night like looking at pictures of food. They spend hours upon hours just planning out their meals, like what they're going to eat. They develop this crazy food focus, and then they think of it as like this is taking me towards my goal, this is the right thing to do. And then after a show, when they don't have that goal anymore, they're just completely lost. And that's when you see like just crazy binge eating habits. You see people who just lose control completely of their goals. They're not only putting on weight, but in a way that's just like very detrimental to their health and their well-being. And then they want to just go ahead and diet again. So it just kind of creates this really messed up cycle that I'm sure you probably are aware of.
Yes, I've definitely experienced much of that myself, and something that we try to get our athletes to do now, obviously being more informed, is to start from a position of strength, which, like you were saying, encompasses healthy relationship with food, understanding of the process, and that the competition physique is not something that's sustainable, and all of those important things related to their diet, psychology, and all the rest of it. But what is your advice now, having all the knowledge and experience that you have in dealing with the contest prep and all those issues that arise? How do you advise your clients during those periods where their psychological health is really taking a hit due to the contest prep, whether it be in the contest prep itself and then coming out of it?
I think that the first thing is, before even partaking in a contest prep, seeing what their motivation for that contest prep is.
Yeah.
Not everybody is meant to compete. Just because you have lost a good amount of weight and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think a lot of times people, they have this, perception of like, all right, I went from, I've lost 30 pounds. I'm ready to take my body to an extreme. And then they do it too soon. And that's the thing. They don't give themselves enough time to build up, really good behaviors when it comes to eating. All they've ever known is how to lose weight. And, obviously the contest prep is the easy part. I think it's afterwards, So I think that just seeing what their motivation is behind competing, and you can kind of tell if a person is actually motivated to compete because they seek, the need for achievement, like they want to do it from themselves, they want to achieve something, or they're doing it because they fear failure, or they think that, they have some sort of external pressure to do it, or they still don't really like where they're at now. So they think that once they get to a position where they are stage lean, they'll love themselves. And you can just kind of look at their behaviors. Somebody says, they want to compete, and they're like, coach, sign me up, I'm ready. You have to ask them, okay, so what have your off-season behaviors look like? Like, what if we say that you're going to start a contest prep in the next 2 months? What are your behaviors going to look like in the next 2 months? Are you going to just gorge yourself with food because you feel like you have to take advantage of this, window until you start your prep? Or are you going to kind of behave in a way that like demonstrates like this is something you really want to do? I'm going to, continue eating. I'm going to continue training in a way that is conducive to my overall goal. You can look at a person's latency and like how long that they take whenever they're first given the opportunity to do something versus how long they actually take to do something. So just taking an example, cardio, right? Or maybe even weight training or whatever it is. And just, living with Alberto, and he just finished a contest prep. He did cardio first thing in the morning as soon as he woke up, because it was the first opportunity that he had to get it out of the way, because he knew that it would contribute to the overall goal. People who procrastinate, people who dread going to the gym, people who are like, oh, I got to get my cardio in during this contest prep, you're probably not really motivated for yourself in order to be able to do this. And yeah, there are just a bunch of different things. So just, I guess, seeing what their actual incentive is for doing a contest prep, I think that that's kind of where it begins. And then obviously throughout the entire contest prep cycle, I think that hundreds of clients, and they
Sorry, Leanna. Sorry, it just cut out there. My bad. So their incentive for the goal, their incentive to compete, and then shoot from there. And I'll just snip this out.
Okay. So did you get like all that I said about their incentive to compete?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great. So really, you just have to look at what their incentive is to compete. And then I think the second thing is hiring a coach who is aware of the psychological adversities that a contest prep can create. And I'm sure, I see this all the time, and it grinds my gears, and I'm sure that you do too. But there are just, so many local contest prep coaches near me who have hundreds of clients who brag about, I've won, so and so overalls. Like they brag about their clients' achievements, and they take the responsibility of their clients' health. So they do their training for them, they do their nutrition for them, and they don't tend to their psychological needs. And that is something that is so huge, and it's extremely irresponsible. If you see a client having just really, really disordered, food focus throughout their prep, if they're like posting like, 5-6 things about, their low calorie, like salad and all their Walden Farms dressings, and like to a point where it's excessive, then that's something that you need to intervene on, because that's not healthy and that's not normal. If you are constantly dealing with a client who is having binge episodes, who was like, I don't even know what happened. I just went off this weekend and I lost control and I'm up 10 pounds. Okay, we're humans and that happens. But if that's something that's happening regularly, then that's something that it needs to be addressed. And there are just like so many things that a coach should be doing throughout the contest prep to ensure that, obviously that we're doing everything that we can for them to reach their goals, but we're doing it in a way that's keeping their mental health at the forefront, because that's so important. So whether that be, continuing to nurture their basic psychological needs in order to create motivation that is, sustaining and that is for themselves, or whether to, continually ask them, how are you feeling? Like, what is your goal? Do you feel like, do you buy into the plan? Like, do you have a sense of self when you're thinking about these goals? Like just asking them. And then obviously just kind of preparing them psychologically for the post-contest phase, telling them this obviously isn't a look or a physique that is maintainable, nor it should be. And then just kind of giving them other goals to look forward to after their show. I think that, where coaches are in charge of training, their nutrition, but there are also many different strategies that they need to implement throughout the entire duration of the contest prep to ensure that they're, staying actually healthy.
Yeah. I think they're all brilliant points, and yeah, it's really good for other coaches to be able to clearly understand that, contest prep coaching is not just about training and diet, and if you don't follow the plan, then then that's your fault, or if issues happen, just follow the plan. It very much needs to encompass that psychological aspect as well, which should be almost an umbrella over the training and the diet to make sure that everything is, being upheld, like you said, as best it can given the circumstances. And it sounds like bodybuilding is a really shitty sport. And by the way, we can swear on this podcast now. It's cool.
Okay, cool.
It sounds like it's a really horrible sport, but I think that bodybuilding brings with it a lot of very important lessons, principles, and just habits and behaviors, obviously outside of all the, neurotic and extreme stuff that can be transferable to not only other sports, but to life. And what I wanted to ask you was, what did you find from bodybuilding that made you a great powerlifter?
So just to kind of go on your statement, I don't think that bodybuilding is a shitty sport. I think that there are definitely times where they create not the healthiest just obsessions and all that kind of stuff, and they it isn't for everyone. But I think that there are ways to make it healthier, kind of like I said. And they teach you, obviously, a lot about yourself, just enough where, we're both continuing to compete, right? It's something that I think after my first show, I was like, all right, I'm done. I hated this. And then I did my second season of shows. I did pretty well. And I was like, all right, it wasn't that bad. And I think that every season is just a learning experience. But like I said, there are ways that you can counteract, and obviously not all of them. There's a point where you're just a little bit crazy the last couple of weeks leading up to that show. But if you can hold off that crazy and then get away from it as urgent as possible, then it doesn't have to be something that is inherently bad. I think that it can teach you the importance of discipline, the fact that And I guess I just kind of realized this past year. In the past, I've always done either only bodybuilding, so I'll be doing a contest prep, or I'll completely switch gears and do only powerlifting. And I just won't keep up with my secondaries. I don't even do like an entire, like a bicep curl throughout the entire season. And then, so it's just always been like one or the other for me. And I guess one thing that I've learned in the past year, just having not competed in either. So it's been 3 years since I've actually done a competition, which is like absolutely like crazy to me. I'm going to at some point. But I think just admiring, my close friends around me who've done contest preps, I've actually just been able to appreciate the art that is bodybuilding. It is absolutely insane that you can train in a certain way and you can eat in a certain way to completely sculpt your physique exactly how you want it. Like obviously with genetics and all that kind of stuff plays a role, but it's pretty insane. Like if you have the willpower and you have the mental fortitude to do something, you can see it through. And I also realized that you don't have to have an immediate goal, a competition goal, in order to continue applying that same willpower and motivation and just like our like urgency to wake up every morning and try to be better when it comes to either bodybuilding or powerlifting. I think that obviously what I've learned when it has come to bodybuilding is like the more muscle you have, the stronger you're going to be essentially. So, it's the cool part, right?
That's the best part.
Yeah. So it's just like, all right, just because I'm not going to be powerlifting immediately in, the next couple of months, then that isn't my choice. I've actually been coming off a couple injuries, which, I feel great, which is, super exciting, but I'm not in a rush to rush the process because I truly love the place that I'm in right now. And I've realized that, being able to control something, there are a lot of things in life that you just don't have control over. But when it comes to doing something that makes you feel good, when it comes to your training, when it comes to, your nutrition, all that kind of stuff, that's pretty much always something that you have control over. Sometimes you have to work around different circumstances. Like if you do have an injury, you have to work around that, but that doesn't mean that you can't continue doing things to make yourself better. So yeah, that's, I guess the big thing.
I really think all of those things are important, and no doubt a lot of bodybuilders make for great powerlifters due to what they learn in bodybuilding. And I think it's a natural progression for a lot of bodybuilders, but you don't see it going the other way, which I think is really interesting. You don't see anyone sign up at the gym and say, hey, I'm just coming from the couch, I want to be a powerlifter. It's very much the natural progression, like you said, and I think it's very useful for powerlifters to be spending, like you are now, significant periods of time doing the bodybuilding work, learning to manage their body composition. They don't necessarily need to get on stage, but I think all of those things become important for success in both sports. And
then also paying attention to the small details that bodybuilding teaches you. I think that in order to have a sustainable powerlifting career, obviously technique and form are huge in that. And then obviously, when you have more muscle mass, you're going to just be able to sustain just not be as prone to injuries, that kind of stuff. So I think that, with bodybuilding, you learn about the mind-muscle connection and just you pay attention to the small details. And I think that that's something that powerlifters could probably take away from bodybuilders. It's like, all right, am I doing this with the correct form? Am I lifting in a smarter way? That kind of stuff.
I definitely agree. And obviously the psychology of bodybuilding and powerlifting, there's a lot of carryover, but there are quite a number of distinctions because excellence and success on the bodybuilding stage, requires that, willpower, motivation, and discipline to be sustained pretty much 24/7 for the duration of the contest prep, because nutrition follows us everywhere. Food is everywhere, and it's something that, we can't just leave to the gym. Whereas powerlifting, it's very much, you go to the gym, you've got to dedicate for those few hours, maybe a few extra. Am I still here?
Sorry, my connection just cut off.
That's cool.
Okay, I didn't get any of that. Sorry,
right,
can you repeat that?
No, that's cool. And obviously, the psychology of powerlifting is vastly different to bodybuilding in many regards. Bodybuilding requires 365 you know, days of dedication, discipline if you're in a contest prep, for example, because nutrition and food follows us everywhere. Whereas powerlifting, obviously, success and excellence on the platform is by and large dictated by what you do in training, which is only, you know, say 10 hours a week with a couple of extra, you know, mobility rehab sessions on the side. So in comparison, some big differences there. But the main one is that, you know, to be a great powerlifter, you need to have confidence and obviously a number of other mental attributes. So what do you see to be, you know, the most important psychological components, you know, related to self-belief, confidence on the platform, and how did you go about, you know, improving those coming from, you know, bodybuilding to powerlifting?
Yeah, I think that that's a really, really good point. You know, there's obviously a bunch of factors that have some layover, but in order to do well as a powerlifter, you have to learn how to compete and you have to perform on game day, which is like the really crappy part, right? I've seen so many times where powerlifters, they dedicate so much time to their training, everything's going well, you know, they're on, you know, path to set like a ton of PRs, you know, the personal best at their meet or even like win. And then meet day comes up and they end up just doing completely terribly. Or in my case, once upon a time, bombing out of like one of the biggest meets of your entire life, which was Arnold 2014 for me. No, 2015. I don't remember, but it was one of those things that, yeah, when it comes to performance-based sport, like being able to perform on game day is everything. It genuinely is. Obviously, the way that training goes leading up to a meet can completely affect your self-confidence and your, you know, self-efficacy going into the meet and your ability to perform. But at the same time, I think that emotional regulation and being able to find that sweet spot when it comes to anxiety control or regulation on game day is super important. So I think that, you know, one thing that before any athlete competes, and I don't, you know, it doesn't matter how many times I've done a meet, every single meet I feel a little bit of anxiety. I'm nervous. You know, you have the physiological effects that come along with anxiety. You're sweating, your heart palpates, your blood pressure is high. And a lot of times athletes, they perceive that as something that's a bad thing. You know, they feel all these symptoms and they're like, oh my gosh, like what do I do? They freak out. They get in their heads too much, and then more than likely, you know, the self-doubt starts to roll in. They're like, holy cow, like I'm not ready. I shouldn't be feeling this way, and then they can't compete well. And I think that the biggest thing when it comes to that is just realizing that an emotion is a reaction to any sort of input or any sort of life event that happens. So we all have emotions, and they're either positive or negative. You know, positive emotions, happy, joy, that kind of stuff, and then negative emotions, fear, anxiety, like just doubt, all that kind of stuff. We all feel them, but it's important to be able to realize, like, just because you feel an emotion doesn't inherently mean that it's a bad thing. So when you have, you know, a little bit of doubt before a meet or before you perform, just kind of changing the way that you appraise that emotion. So changing the way that you view that emotion. It's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm having I'm anxious because I'm excited because I've been working my butt off for this meet because I, you know, put in so much time and effort and it means a lot to me. But I'm having all these emotions because it means that I'm ready, and kind of just changing the way that you feel. It can completely change your self-confidence on game day. And yeah, all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah, I think a lot of really brilliant points here, and anxiety is a very common one, especially among females who, you know, do feel a little bit more pressure, you know, on the platform. Obviously, males aren't exempt from that, but, you know, in my experience working with males and females, you know, a lot of the males, a lot of bravado, a lot of ego and arrogance. They're pretty keen to get out there and do the work, and females at times can sometimes, you know, be fearful and doubt, especially when they're new to the sport. And something that obviously impacts game day performance and longevity in the sport of powerlifting, which I've seen to be really common, is, you know, allowing emotion to arise when we're training, and to allow, training performance to dictate our emotions and feelings about the sport in a whole. And then obviously that can start very early on in the piece, in a training cycle, for example, and then just snowball into a meet. Has there been a time in your powerlifting where you've been so caught up on the numbers and you've let them dictate, your happiness, mood, how you feel about the sport in general, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, I think that that's something that all elite athletes kind of deal with at one point, just becoming too emotionally invested into their goals, into their training, all that stuff. And I wouldn't say it's a bad thing, because that's probably a huge reason why, we're the caliber of athletes that we are, is because we care too dang much, So I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, just like we have periodization when it comes to our training. We have, mesocycles and macrocycles that focus on specific, training goals. It's also really important to be able to incorporate mental training strategies in the exact same way. So obviously, like when it comes to a beginner lifter, they have low self-esteem, they have low confidence, they're just getting into the sport. They haven't had enough experience to build up that competency, which is something that comes when you continue to win, essentially, or when you continue to see success. The more success that you see, the more comfortable you are when it comes to like technique, or when it comes to, your training, the more competent you're going to be. But at the same time, with that comes experience, and a lot of experience is needed. And sometimes, it takes 3-4 meets to be able to gain that competency. But as a coach, it's important to be able to instill that into your athletes from the beginning. So whether it be giving them positive reinforcement or positive feedback, or even like specific feedback that they can improve on. So when it comes to, their lifts, like, having them record their videos and being able to look at their videos, seeing, what is it that I'm doing wrong? Asking them questions, not just saying, okay, this is what you're supposed to be doing, but allowing them to be a part of that process. It allows them to continue learning, and they start to become more competent in their form and technique. Just basically like just giving them, positive feedback, telling them, all right, this week didn't go super well, but at the same time, we're still on track, obviously not lying to them to like fluff them up, but just being an encouraging role model in their life. Because I think that, most athletes, you can ask any athlete, I think we all had that one person growing up that we just learned a lot from, who, shaped our beliefs when it came to whatever sport it was, or who we learned a lot from. The same can go with like professors and teachers. So it's important to play that role. And then it's also important to, teach them different techniques during their trainings, things like, positive self-talk or visualization. Like before a heavy squat day, close your eyes and visualize yourself making the lift. It's called mental imagery rehearsal as well. And it basically is a huge way to be able to build up their confidence. It allows them to visually see, all right, this is, they see themselves capable of doing the lift, which is huge, if they visualize themselves actually doing the lift, they're going to be more confident. They're like, okay, I've got this. But also when it comes to like cues and different feedback and technique, that kind of stuff, they'll feel more confident. So I think that encouraging that throughout different microcycles, like, all right, this next 4 weeks, we're really going to focus on visualization and talking positively about yourself. Maybe this next cycle will focus on some other techniques, but it's important to be able to build up that confidence during training, so it'll translate over to whenever they're actually able to perform.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And that's something that I actually do with a lot of my athletes, and something that was taught to me when I was younger, when I used to play tennis. Funny story, I actually, for those of you who are interested in my tennis career, my coach forced me to sit down and meditate instead of actually practicing tennis, and do visualization techniques for hours a week over the course of 6 months, and I wasn't allowed to hit a ball for 6 months. I was just told to visualize and meditate because I was a little bit of a brat on the court. I used to throw rackets and things.
Yeah.
And most people think that these visualization, positive imagery and mindset techniques are very fluffy and, aren't, scientifically backed and don't have evidence behind them, but they actually do. I remember there was a study on kickboxers, and they assessed the performance of kickboxers, those who used positive imagery and visualization techniques, and those who didn't. And the ones who used the mindset techniques actually saw improved performance. So it is a practice that has merit, and I think it's something that a lot of athletes ignore. Again, coming back to the bodybuilding where we have coaches who just focus on training nutrition, I think a lot of athletes want to excel, but they ignore addressing the mindset side of things. So really good points on that, Leanna. And moving from there, I wanted to talk about this whole self-love thing and get all fluffy now with that. But again, this is something that's really important for success in both sports.
Yes. Can I say one more thing on that last topic?
Yeah, of course. Go.
Yeah. So I think that you said it's something that actually isn't bogus, right? I think that for the longest time, I was under the impression, I was like, it's just like psychology. It kind of has like a negative stigma to it. Like people are like, oh, I don't need to see a psychologist. I can figure it out. Like there's nothing inherently wrong with me. But I think that people end up, or even like athletes end up seeing psychologists or sports psychologists or just, counselors whenever something goes wrong. And if you look at any elite athlete across the board, and I'm talking about like Olympic level athletes, I'm talking about, just like elites, like at the very top, they all understand that the mental component that has driven them to be as successful as they have is so important. So not only with their nutrition, and like think about it, if you want to be the best that you can be, you're going to try to control all factors that can positively, like correlate to that. And that comes with nutrition when it comes to training, all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you'll see that, like you said, there's a lot of research that shows that, mindfulness, positive self-talk, emotion regulation, all that kind of stuff, it does positively impact performance. There is, the whole study of sports psychology is essentially studying what factors, and there are multiple different factors, but what factors can lead to optimal performance. And like you said, there's a lot of research out there, and you'll see that, all right, like, yeah, I think a lot of people do neglect that stuff, but you'll never see a high-level athlete neglect that stuff.
Yeah, and I completely agree, and it's something that was brought to my attention back in the tennis days. But that's what often separates the good from the great, is what's between their ears. And the issue that I see arising is we have so many people who come from, being just general lifters and, just training for the love of it, transition into a sport, they become good at the sport for whatever reason, but then as amateur athletes, they don't recognize that, to take that next step, it's often not, their physical abilities that's the limiting factor that separates them from, the elite level athletes. It's what's, psychologically preventing them from unlocking that, physical potential, so to speak.
Absolutely. And then also tending to motivation, which is huge throughout the duration. I think that that's a huge thing I see as well. People, they love powerlifting, they get into it, they're going balls to the wall. Yeah, exactly. And then they fall off, whether that be they burned out, so they just invested all their energy into it, and it became something that they no longer wanted because they loathed it, because it was something that they were too emotionally invested in, or they just lose motivation. And I think that, the same can be said. Sports psychology is not only important for performers, but also just, the everyday exerciser. To be able to adhere to an exercise plan, you have to, people are obviously very motivated when they first set a goal, but in order to see that goal through, you have to stay motivated throughout the duration of it. And I think that that's something that, sports psychology can 100% be capable of helping do. So.
Yeah, definitely. And it's funny, I actually had this question that I wanted to ask you today, but I thought based on how our discussion was going, it'd be good to transition into the self-love stuff. But let's digress back to that and talk about sustainability in powerlifting. So there's a huge drop-off rate in powerlifting. Like Obviously, it's very hard to measure because people come into the sport, go out of the sport, but as a whole, there's, a massive dropout rate, whether it be injury, motivation, like you said. But let's speak to the sustainability end of that. And if you can talk about how you stay motivated and what practices you employ to manage your motivation, like you were just talking about.
Yeah, so I think if I could just take a guess, and this could be completely wrong, but just from, I guess, observation in my inner circle, I would definitely say that a huge reason why people stop powerlifting is because of injury, right? And that's injury is something that in any sport, it's at some point unavoidable. Hopefully best case scenario is that it's infrequent and it doesn't, take the athlete out of the game for too long. But even something like, stubbing your toe on a weight, like it happens. Obviously, worst case scenario is that it's something that is pretty detrimental to an athlete and it takes them out from practice for weeks, months. They have to get surgery, that kind of stuff. And obviously, we don't wish that upon anyone, but that happens. And that's a huge reality, especially in a sport that is pretty demanding on your body.
Just a little
bit.
I
would say, so I would say, the physical aspect of injury, obviously, but that's the cool thing. It's like when you have an injury such as an ACL tear or, you injure something else, for the most part, it's pretty predictable, the timeline of when you'll be able to continue practicing and get back into, the competition, right? But the biggest thing is, and if that were the case, then every single athlete who was ever injured would go through their, physical therapy and they do everything right. And then they'd be able to just start right back where they left and they'd, have a thriving career. But the sad reality is that majority of athletes who end up becoming injured, they either don't ever come back to the sport, or they do come back to the sport and they're forever fearful. So I think that one thing that psychology or just like mental training can help with is obviously the adherence to physical therapy. I don't know if you've ever had an injury, but it's a really daunting feeling to be an athlete on the sideline, watching all of your teammates practice and watching everybody around you continuing to get better. And you are just, like that you see your friends hitting PRs or you see, people are, they're just improving without you. And you're just like, oh, I'm still here. It's a really terrible feeling. And I think that, adherence to physical therapy routines. So just like we would if we were 4 weeks out from the meet, like we would never miss a training session. We would never miss, like nutrition, that kind of stuff. Like we would be very on top of everything. And I think that instilling that kind of mindset when it comes to adhering to a physical therapy routine, like wake up every single morning. Yeah, it might not be the most glamorous thing. You're not pulling PRs by any means, but you're still doing things that can allow you to get better. I think that that's, a huge thing. And then whether it be just coping with the actual pain of your injury. That's something that imagery, there's research, I'm not just making this up, there's research that shows that you can improve your recovery from an injury simply by like thinking about the recovery of the injury. It's actually pretty insane. And then also I think a huge one is just being able to stay competent and stay confident throughout the time off in order to, whenever, you're medically cleared to compete again, being able to go in there without like fear of re-injury or without, feeling like you're no longer as strong as you were prior to the injury or as, capable as you were prior to the injury. I think that, that's an absolutely, probably one of the biggest things I would say when it comes to sustainability in powerlifting.
Yeah, I definitely agree with a lot of that. Injury is one of the biggest reasons many people do feel that they are frozen in time in their lifting career and everyone's just, bypassing them. And some brilliant points there, Leanna. And to talk to, self-esteem, self-love, it seemed to be a moral flaw, and selfish, vain, practice to engage in by many people, if you love yourself and things like that. And studies of, emotional human behavior, self-esteem, self-worth are really important in understanding, how a person feels about themselves, and obviously that then influencing their actions, behaviors, outcomes, and so on and so forth. So, can you talk to us as about how you identify where somebody's self-esteem is at, how people can assess these kind of things? Obviously, they would need to see a psychologist, professionally. But what are some,
Yeah.
I guess, red flags if somebody has low self-esteem as a whole, and what can they do about that?
Yeah, I think yeah, there's a lot of research that shows that, obviously like self-esteem can contribute to many different facets of life. Like we see it, and I think a lot of people see it as something that is vain, especially just because of the fact that we're involved in powerlifting, which is already seen to be a very vain sport. People think about self-esteem and self-confidence, and they're like, oh, they just like have to feel really good. They feel really good about themselves, and they have to have other people tend to that feeling good about themselves. And it's something that a lot of people kind of shy away from. I actually, funny story, not funny story, but like just on top of this, a couple weeks ago, I went to a middle school and I did like a guest lecture for their PE, their health and wellness course. And we talked about self-esteem. And I asked all the girls, I was like, what is it? Like, what do you think about self-esteem? And do you think it's important to have self-esteem? And the majority of the girls are like, self-esteem is good, but not too much self-esteem because you don't want people to think that you're arrogant, or you don't want people to, just think that you're all you do is talk about yourself. And that's kind of the I guess idea that a lot of people feel when they think about self-esteem. But I think that it's really important. And research has shown that when you have like self-esteem, you're more likely to set a goal and see it through. You're more likely to seek out opportunities. You're more confident in yourself. You'll do better in school. You'll do better in work. And then you are able to maintain longer and just like healthier and sustainable, lasting relationships. So I think just talking about self-esteem, it's obviously super important. So how do we, I guess, acknowledge whether or not a person has self-esteem? And like with something like as bodybuilding, it's kind of apparent when one of your clients has low self-esteem. They're either and it's typically related to their body. They're talking about something that they don't like about their body, or they update you with a fluctuation on weight, and then they completely freak out about it, or they are getting closer and closer to a deadline and they're having huge self-doubts. And I think that that's something that's pretty apparent when it comes to a sport like that. However, it's something that I think that the majority of people kind of experience at some point in their lives is low self-esteem, low confidence. It doesn't necessarily mean that you hate yourself or you hate your body, but you don't truly believe in yourself and your capabilities to the extent that you should. And I think that it's something that is extremely important, and there are multiple different ways to improve your self-esteem and your confidence.
Awesome. And obviously, social media has changed the game in terms of self-esteem, because all of a sudden we're making comparisons all the time. We're seeing other people, their highlight reel of their life and things like that. So in the digital world, improving self-esteem can be a lot harder because we're exposed to a lot more. So what is your take on this? And how do you advise the girls in the Smart Fit Girls program to deal with social media in relation to building self-esteem?
Yeah, I think especially when it comes to social media, it's crazy how something that can be so awesome and connect people in so many ways and be like a really good platform can also be so detrimental to the way that people feel about themselves. We see other lifters on social media. We see people, and they show a very small highlight reel of their lives that most of the time, as we know, aren't actual representations of every single thing that goes on in their lives. With Smart Fit Girls, and just to put a little background, it's an after-school program that's kind of built on improving girls' self-esteem and self-confidence. And then there's also a physical activity component, which, physical activity and just being involved in sports at an early age has been shown to, not only combat childhood obesity, which is a very prevalent issue, especially in the United States, but it's also been shown to improve their self-esteem and self-confidence later down the road. So that's kind of, our goal when it comes to Smart Fit Girls. And the reason why we implement weight training is because it's teaching them a form of physical activity that focuses on, what the body is capable of doing and all the really awesome things, when it comes to putting on muscle or when it comes to getting stronger or, being your personal best, as opposed to the very common, thing that we're taught as women, as men too, probably at a young age, is that, we should eat in a way to be smaller. We should exercise to lose weight, to lose fat, that kind of stuff. So when it comes to like social media and teaching these girls, who are all adolescent age girls, and it's crazy just the amount of social media interaction that these girls have. They all have Instagrams and Facebooks and Twitters, and they see a lot of the same things that we do, which is kind of scary. But I think just we do a unit, and it's basically on about the power of Photoshop, the prevalence of Photoshop, and then just the way that social media can impact other people. So we kind of we show them a couple videos that are kind of scary, just how much Photoshop is used when it comes to the fitness industry, when it comes to modeling, when it comes to just advertising in general. So, we're watching TV and we're seeing advertisements. It's not like we choose to immerse ourselves in this, but it's something that we see every day. And whether we realize it or not, it's having an impact often on the way that we perceive ourselves, or maybe an impact on like our capabilities or what we should be doing better. So I think just first of all, educating these girls and letting them know, like, all right, like there's nothing wrong with having social media. It can be a really powerful tool, but you probably shouldn't believe everything that you see, because the majority of it, advertising, they use social media to sell things. I don't know if you've ever read Gene Kilborn's Killing Me Softly?
No.
Or Killing Us Softly? Okay, so it's a book about just the power of advertising. And, like think about, I guess, like 30, 40 years ago, just advertisers, they kind of created like an ideal body image when it comes to women. And they create like some sort of standard that women should look up to in order to strive for. And nowadays, it's like women doing this to other women. Mm-hmm. It's like so messed up, right? Like we're supposed to be all in it together. And it's like women who are like, it's just realizing that, social media, it's a good platform to have, but it's not something that should be the gold standards by any means. And I think that the more confident that you are when it comes to your own abilities or, whatever your goals are, the higher your self-esteem will be. So one, important aspect that we teach these girls, and it's something that I've been applying to myself and then as well as my clients, is like the power of education. Being aware of, nutrition, being aware of, like, we teach the middle schoolers, different body parts. We teach them, muscular anatomy, and like, okay, we don't only use our, biceps in order to bicep curl, but it's really important for everyday living activities, like picking up your little baby sister or, like doing your laundry, that kind of stuff. So I guess educating them on the importance that their body plays in many other aspects of life. I think that a lot of times we get so caught up in looking a certain way or, working out to, for some competitive edge, whatever it is, that we take for granted the fact that our bodies are really freaking cool, and that, like, honestly, like, yeah, I like my legs and they're strong and they're muscular, but they allow me to get out of bed every single day and walk to my kitchen or walk to work or whatever it is, like something, just like an activity that I take for granted, like every single day. Like I'm taking for granted right now the fact that I can talk to you, which is like kind of insane in itself, right? So I think educating them on, the purpose that their body serves, and eating in a way and enforcing, like, or not enforcing, but just like educating them in a way to eat that powers, their body, instead of, we ask the girls, like, hey, what do you know about nutrition? And the first thing that comes out of their mouths are things that their parents taught them, like carbs are bad, you shouldn't eat carbs, or, you shouldn't eat fats. And it's really important, like we teach them, like, okay, that's actually not the case. Like, protein, fat, and carb, they all play their own vital and valuable role in your nutrition, and teaching them all of those different roles. So they're just more educated when it comes to that stuff, and they're not going to just buy into the latest, Instagram post of their favorite model, saying that carbs are bad or don't eat fats or whatever it is. So that's like a huge one. And then just, like being able to allow them. So like the entire program is based off of the self-determination theory by Ryan and Deci. So it focuses on autonomy, relatedness, and competence. And I think that those are three things that if you are constantly nurturing those, or if you have somebody that might be nurturing those are things that will absolutely improve your motivation. It'll improve your self-esteem, and you'll set goals and they'll have personal meaning to them. And that's I think one of the most important things. Like I love the relatedness aspect. So just being and interconnecting with people who have similar goals as you, or similar mindsets, who are encouraging, who are uplifting, that kind of stuff. And I think that, that's something that you can either find with social media, or it can be a place where there's just a lot of negativity and people just bashing on people for no reason. So we encourage these girls, like, all right, like find a group of girls, like look around you, all these girls who you might not have ever like been friends with inside of school, like they all have a common interest as you. Relate to them, like, use them, support each other, lift each other up. And that's, something that can absolutely improve self-esteem.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And community is one of the cornerstones. Obviously self-determination theory has, discussed relatedness, but community and being around people who have similar values, beliefs, and, goals is really important, especially for, adolescents in the case of the Smart Fit Girls program, Leanna. And obviously, as a coach and mentor to these young girls, you get to work with them on quite a, deep level, I presume, on many levels. And what have been a lot of the common concerns, besides obviously the fear of carbs and whatnot that they're getting from their parents, but what have been a lot of the trends, or I guess commonalities amongst these young, female adolescents in relation to their body image and self-esteem?
Yeah, I think that's, something that whenever I first signed up to be a coach for, I had no idea how profound and how deep our meetings would be. Obviously, it took a while for them to get to know us, but we do some pretty extensive or intensive training in order to be able to deal with some situations. But there are some things that, you hear a girl and where we do like an anti-bullying lesson, right? And I mean, it's insane some of the things that come out of these girls' mouths. And, when it comes to body image, just, not being able to even say one positive thing that they like about their bodies, calling themselves fat, saying their parents call them fat. It's things that you would literally just blow your mind. And then obviously with bullying, it's something that is really common around the adolescent age, especially when it comes to girls, is not only things that that people aren't just born with bad body image. You're a baby and you're innocent, and then you grow up, and these are all things that we're learned, whether they're from parents or whether from other people. So I think, a huge thing is just, educating them. Like bullying is something that is real. The majority of times, like when somebody has a negative thing to say about somebody else, that's not constructive. It's not rooted in, helping their own personal development. It's just something that's really ugly and negative. A lot of those things can stem from low self-esteem and low self-confidence. So we teach them, obviously, like it's important to love other people. It's important to tell other people nice things. It's important to help people when you can. Like it doesn't, obviously we all do that, and it comes very naturally to the people that we love and the people that are important to us. But even just, strangers, people that are, you're at a restaurant who's serving you, that kind of stuff, treating them with compassion and respect. Obviously, you have no idea what they're going through. They might be negative to you, or they might be a little ugly to you, but it's important to, always try to be as respectful as you can, just because it not only helps with your own self-esteem. Like I know for me, whenever I'm helping somebody and I make a person feel good, or I compliment someone, it makes me feel good about myself. I'm like, I just made their day, and that felt really awesome. But yeah, it can help them as well. So we teach them, like the importance of kindness to others, but also obviously more importance kindness to yourself, because it's something that, I think that I work with women who are, grown women, and it's insane that throughout whatever experiences that they face, whether it started from at a young age or maybe, feelings of, not being in control or competent, like throughout college or whatever it is. But these women come to me and they're like, oh, I just feel really ugly about myself. I'm gross. I'm like, I just want to lose some weight. Like they're just so harsh and negative to themselves. And I think that this is something that is rooted, at a young age, because we pass it down. We say, I mean, I'm not a mom, but I can just imagine these girls' moms, they say negative things about themselves, like, oh, I look fat in this dress. They don't really realize,
The
like their
impact that
daughter,
has. Yeah.
yeah, like their daughter thinks, they're the most amazing person. Like I know for me, like I think my mom is just the absolute best, most beautiful woman in this world. And when she says something negative about herself, it impacts me. I'm like, how could you think that about yourself? How, like, am I, like, I'm not lying to you, are you calling me a liar? I think you're beautiful. How can you say so many negative things about yourself? So I think that, that's something that it's sad, because a lot of these girls, we grow up and we're influenced by the people around us. And that's the biggest thing, is we can't help, or we can't change, I guess our environments and how we grew up, but you can also try to make an influence and allow people to see things in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's very true. I think it all starts at home, and a lot of these issues do arise, from a young age, and it's very, very cool to see you, working with younger girls, and being so driven and passionate about making a difference, Leanna. And final thing I wanted to ask you, Leanna, what's next? When are you getting back on stage or the platform?
Yeah, so the goal actually was to compete this past year. And then unfortunately, I did have a couple of medical issues come up over the summer that I had to get procedures for. They were completely unexpected. I actually haven't really talked much about them. I maybe will at some point. But yeah, I think that that was pretty detrimental. And I remember thinking, like, and they're kind of serious. I'm okay now, but they were kind
That's
of
good.
serious. And I remember thinking, whenever it happened, whenever I found out, I was like, holy cow, like this is gonna impact my competition plans this year. Like me and Berto planned on competing. I was gonna do WMBF Worlds. I was gonna, make my awesome comeback, all that kind of stuff. And then I realized that that was the first initial reaction to this medical issue that I found out that was pretty, I would say, emotionally impacting. And it made me realize, like, holy cow, I need to take a step back, and I need to prioritize, what's really important in my life. And if anything, it made me, like, yeah, it was a bummer. I wasn't able to compete, but it made me take a step back and, like, realize, like, I am so thankful for my health. I'm so thankful for, my ability to just wake up and go on a 5 mile walk every single morning. And I actually, like, since that happened, I've literally walked every single morning, like, and I don't sleep in anymore. It was just one of those things it was pretty life changing. But, yeah, it just started making me prioritize, other things. So it made me prioritize my relationships. It made me prioritize, like, my business. Like, I don't know exactly what my, I guess, career path in the next, 5 years will be, because I kind of want to do everything. Like I want to coach, and then I want to write a book, and then I want to work with kids, and then I want to work with high level athletes, and it's just like a big jumbled mess of things, right? But more than anything, it's kind of given me the urgency to wake up every morning and just make three things a priority at the time, and then pursue them with everything that I've got. And then it's also made me, I guess, rekindle a love for training, just to freaking train, that I lost a couple of years ago. I think, like, kind of
That's
what
cool.
we talked about. Yeah, we talked about, like, when you're an athlete and it becomes part of your lifestyle. Like it's great. You see all this progress, you see improvement, but it also becomes your life. And it can be really easy to offset, having balance when it comes to all the other aspects of your life. So for me, it was just like, I'm just fortunate to be able to go to the gym. I'm actually going to the gym after we get off this podcast, and I'm going to train, and it's going to feel awesome. And I don't have a specific goal, and I don't have a deadline, but I'm going to act like I do. I continued dieting kind of, or not even dieting, I would say, but like my nutritional habits became so much better when I stopped prepping, because it was crazy, because it wasn't like a chore to me. It wasn't something that was daunting. It wasn't like, oh, I can only eat 1,400 calories today. Like, it was something that I was like, all right, like, I'm going to eat in a way that's conducive to my long-term goals. I'm not competing this year, but I will at some point. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, I'm not sure. I would like to compete, for sure at some point in both. Right now, I'm kind of on the rise back to training. I'm getting stronger. I think I'm probably actually the strongest I've ever been. I just haven't been training in a way that's been specific to powerlifting. But I think that once I do, I'll see that I'm really freaking strong, and that's exciting.
I've seen those single arm dumbbell presses. They're pretty monster.
Thank you. Thank you. Hopefully that'll translate over to my poverty bench. We'll see. But yeah, and then when it comes to competing in itself, I actually set a goal for myself, and I stopped my dieting phase a couple months ago, and then I told myself, you know what? I'm not gonna diet for a long time.
Cool.
I'm at a point where, like, typically in my off season, I'll get like 30 pounds over my stage weight, and it's something that's always really hard to get off. And then I realized that even myself, like, we kind of talked about the unhealthy tendencies to, like, go a little crazy and then want to re-diet and go a little crazy. And I'm guilty myself of, like, having in the past, having an expo that I felt I needed to diet for, or, a random photo shoot that I felt I needed to diet for. And it's not only like self-sabotaging to your gains, obviously, because you're just not going to be seeing improvements when you're continuing to do that. But I think that it instills like a really negative way of thinking that it's like an on or off switch. Like, if I'm not competing in the near future, I'm not going to have any behavioral habits that show that. And also the fact that, like, we just, like, especially as women, I think men do this too, but like the fact that, like, you need to spend the majority of your life dieting and restricting calories. And I think that that's a huge problem that our industry does. And I will say that I've probably spent, like, I'll look at like the past like 5 years, and I've probably spent like a good amount of that time dieting, whether it be for competitions or just, to look good for a vacation. So that's kind of like the goal right now, is like, all right, like, I'm going to eat in a way that's responsible and that's conducive to my progress, because we always have room to keep getting jacked and strong. But I'm also just going to challenge myself to just not diet. So if I end up, gaining 5-6 pounds over the holidays, okay, that was a conscious decision that I made. And I want to, like, be able to be okay with that without feeling the need to offset that. So I don't know how long it's going to last, but I want to do it as long as possible, not only for, like, myself, but also just to kind of, be an influence to an industry that is just so diet focused. I think that being okay with where you're at, and, having goals to improve in other ways that are only based on your body composition, I think that that's super important. There are a lot more important things in this world other than looking a certain way. So I think, by focusing on just, being comfortable and, like, just, I have so much gratitude for just the things that my body is capable of doing right now. And then also just continuing to want to put, like, quality and solid information out there and continue helping people in a way that's conducive to all areas of their life. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
That's
Whenever
cool.
I compete, it'll be good though. I want to do women's bodybuilding. So
I think that's a brilliant point, in that you don't need to compete to still be an athlete, and especially in these sports. And I think that being able to dedicate the same amount of effort towards other goals that are related to your sport is equally as important as being able to do so when you have to enter a contest prep or competition prep for the platform, whatever the case may be. So I think that's very cool, and I've loved our chat today. So I just wanted to say big thank you for your time. Guys, make sure you check Leanna out and everything she does. I'll put details in the description box below so you can all follow her. She's a pretty cool chick, as I'm sure you're all aware now. Again, thank you, Leanna, and we'll speak to you next time.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you.